Hi guys, welcome to my channel, and how are y'all doing today? So here on Abby the Witch, we talk all things witchcraft. If that is something that you can vibe with, you can go ahead and hit subscribe. You can also follow me on other platforms like Instagram and Patreon, Abby the Witch, just like it is here. So here on Abby the Witch today, I'm very excited because I actually made a new tag. This is specifically for trad witches, but you don't have to be a trad witch to do this tag. I would love to see you participate in this tag. So this tag is all about pulling inspiration from things like witch trial records, confessions during those times, and even lore too. So I was struggling with naming this tag or coming up with a name for this tag. And so I put a poll up on YouTube memberships, on Patreon, and in a group chat that I'm part of. And a combination of all of those votes, the one that won was hashtag yellowbird black dog. So the name of this tag is hashtag yellowbird black dog. I love that name. So if you would like to help me in the future come up with names like this for different tags, or what videos should come next, or whatever, you should join my Patreon or my YouTube memberships, and in the future you can cast your vote. So the first half of this video is going to be specific accused witches and their confessions, pulling inspiration from those recorded, documented confessions. The first person is the iconic Agnes Samson. She was part of the Scottish witch trials. She was accused of trying to assassinate the king or the bride of the king, the princess he was trying to marry, via witchcraft, right? So this was around 1590, 1592. I have read that she tried to assassinate the king himself on his ship by conjuring up a storm. But I've also read that he tried to assassinate the princess he was trying to marry and ship over to Scotland. So yeah, one way or the other, she was accused of using witchcraft to try to take down political enemies. Yeah. So how I've kind of pulled inspiration from this is I've actually asked Agnes Samson, her spirit, to help me in taking down modern, current political enemies. If you've never worked with witches of the past, whether you're a trad witch or not, whatever, it's so powerful. There is a connection there through our red soul. I really encourage you to try to look into different witch trial records and try to work with people like Agnes Samson. I also utilize bone dust because of her. I read about Agnes that she was a midwife, and she, in her midwifery, utilized things like bone dust for delivery of a child. So I think it was maybe for pain relief, or I'm not really sure, but she utilized bone dust in her midwifery. I don't use bone dust exactly how she does. Like I said, this is all just inspiration. I actually was inspired by her to use bone dust, but I use it for my death incense. So I added bone dust to my death incense, and yeah. All right, the next person I want to talk about is also an icon within the trad space, and that is Isabelle Gaudy. I've heard her last name pronounced Gaudy and Gaudy, so I don't know. I'm just gonna say Gaudy, but yeah. She was another witch, accused witch, during the Scottish witch trials in Scotland. She is another icon within the trad space. Her confession, if you have not read her confession or like read about her, follow down that rabbit hole because it's pretty iconic. Supposedly she was never physically tortured, but I could be wrong on that. That's what I've heard. She just openly confessed to doing witchcraft and being a witch. Now, that being said, it depends on your definition of torture. I mean, being publicly on trial, I mean, public humiliation, I mean, that could be torture enough for someone to confess to something. So one of the things in her confession that I absolutely fell in love with was an incantation to turn into an animal, specifically a hare. Now, I like to think that this was her fetch spirit, her black soul, but it could just be an animal that the devil kind of gave her the ability to turn into. I'm not really sure. I like to think maybe it was her fetch spirit, but yeah. Anyway, I pulled inspiration from that by making my own incantation to turn into my fetch spirit, or to kind of awaken my fetch spirit inside of me. And let me read it to you. Okay, so this isn't totally done and I might change it a little bit. She also has an incantation to turn back into her human form. I haven't gotten that far. I only got as far as turning into my fetch spirit. So anyway, I believe that my fetch spirit is a black canine, some sort of black dog, a wolf maybe even, but I just think of it as a black canine. This is her original incantation, if you're not familiar. I shall go into a hare with sorrow, scythe, and meekle care, and I shall go in the devil's name, while I come home again. And this is mine. I shall go into a black dog with fur as thick and black as midnight fog, and I shall go in the devil's name and stay until I'm home again. I love it. Yeah, I just like, I think it's, I love it. Anyway, so that's my sort of inspired incantation that I made based off of Isabelle Gaudy's incantation. I also, based on that same thing, got a tattoo. Anomaly Diaboli. Anomaly Diaboli, however you want to say it. My Hoosier accent, I don't know. But it translates to in the devil's name, or in the name of the devil. I got it in Latin. Hers was not in Latin. That's my own kind of flair on it. But yeah, it translates to in the devil's name. So that was part of her incantation. I love it. I mean, obviously you can see in the devil's name and other things also, but that's where I got it from. So yeah. Also with Scotland, this isn't a specific person. This is just like Scottish witch trials in general. This was a different part of Scotland. This was not specifically Gaudy, but there's another thing that really inspired me from these specific witch trial records in Scotland. And that was supposedly witches would squat down and put one hand under their feet and one hand on top of their head, and they would dedicate everything in between their hands to the devil. I've never specifically physically have actually done this, but the idea of dedicating my whole body to the devil, yeah, I would say that more just like resonated with me a lot. I just love that idea, and I really just hold that concept in my memory, in my head. Like, I've never forgotten that after I read it. It, again, just really resonated with me. This idea of dedicating your whole body, but like this idea of like a physical, almost black baptism, I'm kind of obsessed with. So yeah, I really loved that. I actually was like really struggling. I want to give credit. I actually was really struggling finding that source the other day, and Jasmine and our friend Nora actually helped me figure it out. We thought it was Gaudy's confession specifically, but it was actually like more like Scotland in general. So yeah, thank you friends for helping me remember where I heard that. All right, kind of shifting countries here. We're going over to Salem, the Salem witch trials, and the specific witch that I want to talk about is Tituba. If you're not familiar with Tituba, that's another witch I really encourage you, just even for just the sake of honoring her, read up on her. I have read that she was Native American, but I've also read that she was Black and from Africa. I heard that she was Black and from somewhere in the Caribbean. I've heard that she was a mix, so she was like a mixed race person. I don't know, but she was a person of color, definitely not a European woman. Tituba was accused of hurting some young women within Salem, along with two other accused women, Sarah Osborne and Sarah Putnam, I think. Now, these two things I'm about to talk about that I've sort of pulled from her confession, you can see these things, especially the first one, you can see them in Salem witch trial confessions in general. The second one you see like all over the place. It's not even just Salem. But the first one is this idea that the devil appeared to her as a yellow bird. And there you go. There's the first part of the tag name. I don't know. This really resonated with me. So I pulled inspiration from that by simply adding that to the list of faces of the devil in my personal practice. So that's one other way I see the devil now, is as like a bright yellow bird. I see him as like a little canary. That's how I picture it in my head, how she saw him when she describes him as a yellow bird. So the next thing she said was sometimes he also appears to her as a black dog. There you go, there's the other part of the tag name. Now again, this black dog, the idea of the devil appearing as a black dog is all over the place, isn't just specifically Tituba's confession. But I've always felt connected to canines, but I felt like I was a black canine, a black wolf, a black dog, long before I even read up on Tituba or tradcraft in general even. So this was more of a confirmation or a shared gnosis for me. A really cool moment to read up on this and realize that it's not just me that views the devil as a black dog. So, all right, so the second half of this video is going to be lore. Okay, so pulling inspiration from more lore. We're gonna kind of deviate from confessions and go into more like folklore. All right, so a lot of lore that I pull inspiration from is lore on having red hair, okay? Having red hair is cross-cultural. I mean, I feel like almost every culture has some sort of superstition or folklore on redheads. Some cultures believe that redheads have red hair because it comes from hellfire. Some people believe it's literally a mark of the devil. Some people believe that you are supernatural, you have supernatural abilities, because it's just viewed as not normal and it's viewed as abnormal, which all these things really inspire me. It makes me feel more connected to the devil. So really it strengthens, I feel like it strengthens my connection to him. I feel like I've been marked by him. I feel like I was a born witch because I'm born with red hair. I'm not saying anyone has to have red hair. I'm not saying that, okay? This is just something that inspires me and makes me feel like a powerful witch. There's also this idea that redheads obviously are Scots and they're descendants of the Celts, right? The Celts were known for having a lot of rage and being very aggressive people. So I kind of like think of that and that like stereotype of redheads having a big temper, I guess. I use that. I use that to inspire me and to, I use that in my practice to kind of like cradle my sacred rage, right? I utilize my sacred rage. If you've been following me for a while, you know that my sacred rage and wrath is very precious to me. And I've learned to embrace it. And all of this lore kind of on red hair has really helped me do that. Okay, the next bit of lore I really want to talk about is the witch's mark or the devil's mark. And this was, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with this, but this was a mark on the body that they would look for during like the witch trials in Europe and in Salem. They would look for a mark that looked abnormal or that would stick out. And this was supposed to be the little extra teat that the witch would have to feed her familiar. And the familiar would feed from it and drink the blood of the witch. I actually really love this, and I pull inspiration from this by kind of embracing any kind of marks on my body. I have one right here in my cleavage. You don't have to look for it. I just take my word for it. I have one right there that sticks out, and I kind of say that's my witch's mark. So if you have any like freckles or birthmarks, or some people even have like an actual third nipple, yeah, embrace it. It's your witch's mark. There's actually a really cool little ritual in Kate Fruhler's new book, Magic at the Crossroads, The Devil in Modern Witchcraft. And she actually has this little ritual that you do with like a part on your body, like I said, like a birthmark or a mole or something that you feel like embarrassed about or ashamed of because society has taught you that it's gross. And she has a recipe for the devil's water, I think she called it that. And you're supposed to like wipe that mark clean with the devil's water, and then kind of after that you have embraced it as your witch's mark or your devil's mark. So I love that. Check out the book if you haven't. I love that little ritual and just the idea of embracing any abnormalities on my body as my witch's mark. So the next bit of lore I really want to talk about is the devil as an initiator, okay? This is no surprise, right? If you've been following me for a while, you know that like, that's who I view as my sacred father. That's my guy, is the devil. So it probably comes as no surprise that I view him as my initiator. So this is definitely lore in general, but it definitely, I feel like, kind of comes from the witch trials. This idea that witches would, you know, go into the woods or go into a graveyard and make love to the devil, and then they were initiated and they were a witch. I love it. I love it. I believe he initiated me, not necessarily through that way. I'm not going to get into that. If you want to know more about how kind of my experience with working with the devil and kind of what that looks like in my practice, I have a whole video on that. So I can link it down below. So the next bit of lore I really want to talk about are lore on like creeks and graveyards. And there is this idea that specifically with creeks around a graveyard, I think this is Appalachian maybe, but you can actually have like a black baptism utilizing a creek by a graveyard. And it's supposed to be a graveyard, which I think a graveyard is the one that's owned by a church and it's like right next to a church. A cemetery is like not owned by a church. But yeah, and I love that idea. And even just the idea that like creeks are like kind of like this liminal space, especially my local cemetery that I go to, it's a cemetery, it's not a graveyard technically. But anyway, the local cemetery that I go to, there's a creek right behind it, Cool Creek. And I love that creek. I love that cemetery, and just them being like right next to each other. I feel like that creek is kind of a very liminal space. So yeah, I just like love the energy back there. I love to just stand back there as a witch. There's this idea too that you can like take dirt from the graveyard. I forget how exactly it goes, but you take dirt from a graveyard and you go into the creek behind the graveyard and you put the dirt underneath the water for a second to make it like real sooty, you know? And then you smear it all over yourself, and then you like say your words like, I dedicate myself to the devil, and then you dip yourself into the water, and that's supposed to symbolize or actually be you being bathed in the blood of the devil, and that's your black baptism. Okay, so the next and final bit of lore that I really want to talk about and that I pull inspiration from is a familiar as a physical animal. I know, oh my God, this is like so controversial. I don't know, I've noticed that in the witchy community, quote unquote, that thinking that you have a familiar that's a physical animal is like cringe or something. I don't know, I don't really get it. I actually had this conversation, not really a conversation, but like we talked through a couple of comments with another witch on Instagram. And they seemed like a really cool person. I'm not no tea, no shade or anything like that. But they said that familiars are only spirits. It's not in a physical form. And there's no evidence saying that familiars were ever in physical form. And I agree and disagree with that, because if you look at like Matthew Hopkins and like the finding of witches or the discovery of witches, however it is, finding, discovery, his little pamphlet that he made. And there's like that iconic image of like the two witches and him, and there's all the familiars or whatever. Like he said he saw these animals as like physical, weird looking animals, like Vinegar Tom, Sack and Sugar, Pyewacket, right? Yes, they are spirits sent to the witch. They're like demon spirits sent to the witch, but they are spirits in the form of a physical animal. So I like to view one of my cats as my familiar. Long story as to why I think he is my familiar. But yeah, I also just view him as a cat too. But like, I don't know. I like that fantasy kind of. Like I like to think that he's my little familiar, but okay guys, that's all I have for today. If you would like to participate in this tag, I would be thrilled. Again, this is hashtag yellow bird, black dog. Or if you just want to put down in the comments really quick how you pull inspiration from these things, I would love to read those too. That's all I have for today, guys. Until next time, I hope you stay very well, and don't forget to follow the snake. Bye. All right, so some of the first lore.